Today's number of the day, 805. 805 is the number of companies that have pledged to practice or celebrate Juneteenth. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on today in this broadcast as we go through the racial report card that was recently published by Bloomberg. As always, I'm Kamari Yellis. This is the Finance Rebel Show. This is our daily number segment of the Finance Rebel Show. The Finance Rebel Show is all about encouraging people to learn more about money. So on this show, we talk about taxes, stocks, business, economics. If it's about money, it's on the table. Y'all all know I am a tax accountant, so I handle tax problems daily. Former portfolio manager and recovering financial advisor. So I have worked in just about every sector of money as it relates to personal finance and small business. And I love to come here and share my experience and my education with you all. So today we're going to talk about a couple of things. As always, we do our stock market rundown. We're going to cover the Ukraine-Russia situation, talking about pulling Howard Schultz off the bench, right? And like I said, we're going to talk about the race report. Only covering 2 stories today, keeping it short and brief. But like I said, these issues are very, very interesting. All right. So as we get into this, I want to share the screen so I can go over the stock market report. Excuse me, y'all. Excuse me. As we go through all of this. Sorry, y'all. All right, so I don't know what's going on. Why I am coughing so much. This is weird. But the S&P 500 closed up today, 4,411 points. That's where the S&P 500 is today. Remember, the S&P 500 is the 500 largest publicly traded companies in this country, in the United States. Markets up almost 4% week to date. We'll see what happens tomorrow, but it's been off to a good start. Not really related to what's going on in Russia because things are still going crazy over there. All their peace talks are kind of breaking down, but we will see what's going to happen. We will see. We got one more day before the week's out, and so we will see what's going to happen. Oil is back above $100 a barrel. It's at 104. $104 a barrel. So it's still running. It's still up. Oil is still down 5 days, right? Because remember, we saw oil up at $130 last week. Now it's down to 103. It was sub $100 a barrel, but again, it ran up just a little bit, which is to be expected, right? Which is to be expected. But year to date, oil is still at 38%. Oil is up 38%. All right, gold. Gold is up. Well, excuse me. Gold is down. It's still below that $2,000 mark at $1,942. $1,942 per troy ounce. That's what gold is coming in at right now. Like I always say, gold is used as a safe haven during rough times, during calamitous times, where people are trying to figure out where can I store my money, where can I store my assets and not have them destroyed by either war, the markets, or inflation. So a lot of people like gold during these trying times. And Bitcoin. Now, funny enough, Bitcoin is actually trading kind of in lockstep with the stock market. And that really isn't supposed to happen, air quotes. But Bitcoin closed at 40,361. Again, 40,361. Bitcoin is still down year to date, almost 13%. But this week is up almost 4%. So the Bitcoin is still going to be in play. It's still something that everybody is excited about and something that a lot of people still have questions about because they don't understand it. Still don't understand it. All right. Now, as we go through our Ukraine-Russia update, things are still getting crazy, right? Russia is blaming the U.S. sanctions for pushing them towards their first default. What does that mean? So their first default since like 1988, meaning they won't be able to make their bond interest payments. That's what happens when a country goes into default. So they can't pay their bills. Kind of like when you lose your job and you can't pay your water bill, your electric bill. We just don't call it default. We just say that you broke. So, but that is what's happening with Russia right now due to these sanctions. All right. The House of Representatives, the United States House of Representatives, that chamber of Congress, has passed legislation to remove Russia from normal trade relations, right? Remember, I talked about that last week when they had favorite nation status and they were going to remove that. So they're removing that now. It's going to Senate. It's probably going to pass. And then it's going to go to the president, to the executive office, and he will more than likely sign off. I have no problem. I have no worry that this bill is going to get stalled out. I seriously doubt that. Seriously doubt that. All right. And funny enough, Cox Industries, run by Charles Cox. Many of you might have heard of them. They are big time Republican supporters, but they're actually libertarians, but they still are big time Republican supporters, has vowed to stay in Russia and keep 2 of their plants open. So they're kind of bucking the trend like a lot of other United States companies that are pulling out. They said they're going to stay because they wanted to commit to their Russian employees. So again, it's interesting to see how it's all going to shake out. Who knows? But they are getting a lot of political backlash because of their decision to stay in Russia and keep they have like 2 gas plants running. So that's going to be very, very interesting, to say the least. Now, before I get to the big story, right, the race report card, I wanted to talk about this real quick. I wanted to talk about Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks, who is now, again, the interim CEO of Starbucks. So I call it pulling Howard off the bench. Now, the reason why I call it pulling Howard off the bench is because Howard Schultz retired from Starbucks in like 2000. They brought him back in 2008. Then he retired again in like 2016, 2017. And now their immediate CEO, Kevin Johnson, is saying he's going to step down as well. Now, here is a report from the New York Times. Oops. Wrong way. There we go. So here's a report from the New York Times that says, Starbucks CEO retires and Howard Schultz steps in as interim chief executive. Now, if you don't know, Howard Schultz is kind of the man at Starbucks. He's the one who has steered that boat to the multi-billion-dollar status that it's at now. And so, oops, I messed up, y'all. There we go. And so, like I said, he's going to leave the post on April 4th. Kevin Johnson is. Now, I found this article interesting because Starbucks is starting to unionize. So a lot of their coffee shops are starting to look to become unionized, which we know for corporations, that's typically a bad thing. For shareholders, that's typically a bad thing. Why is that a bad thing? Because unions typically ask for and demand higher wages, higher benefits, which put more pressure on profits, right? So there's not as high profits that people can get to. So just think about that. Now, one of the things though that Starbucks has normally been known for is their fair treatment of workers. Now, pandemic has changed everything. So there's been a lot of bad reports. There's been a lot of complaints. And so people are looking at things a little bit differently right now. So, all right, on Wednesday, in an abrupt move, right, listen to this, and then I want to show you a clip later on. But on Wednesday, in an abrupt move, Starbucks said Mr. Johnson, who has held his job since 2017, will retire April 4th after 13 years with the company. All right. His interim replacement until the board of directors names a permanent one is a familiar name, Howard Schultz. Mr. Schultz, 68, joined Starbucks in the 1980s and built it into a global coffee giant. And this isn't the first time he has come back to oversee the company. After stepping down as chief executive in 2000, he returned as CEO from 2008 to 2017 when Mr. Johnson took over and Mr. Schultz became executive chairman. Mr. Schultz will also rejoin the company's board. Shares of Starbucks rose 4.8% to $87.10 on Wednesday. All right, the unexpected leadership change has followed weeks of mounting pressure from investors as more stores filed for union elections. So again, anytime the money's in play, people tend to not want the heads to stay in place. Why? Because they feel like they're not doing a good job. They're not able to steward the ship in these trying times. And so they say, well, let's get rid of them and let's go back to the way it was. Now, the funny thing again about Howard Schultz, he built this up. I think he's had like a 20,000% return on ROI on the stock price over the years. And he's been able to do that and keep Starbucks running and pumping through all the years because he really is the standard bearer when it comes to the culture of Starbucks. But I wanted to show you all a clip. Real quick. Now, this young lady, I'm a fanboy of hers. I have a fanboy of this lady. She is awesome, and I love everything she does. Let me take my glasses off. I'm need my glasses right now. Right. So this is a clip. I'm about to play of Melody Hobson. So if you don't know who Melody Hobson is the co-CEO of Ariel Investments. That's a Black investment management company. They manage about 17, almost $18 billion. Melody is always on TV. And she's a straight shooter. So I wanted to talk about this video clip that she did on CNBC because I thought it was interesting, and I think a lot of you all will get something from it. So let's go here. Why are you playing? There we go. Any day now. Moving a little slow. All right, my internet's not wanting to behave. It's not cooperating. But Melody started to talk about the company culture, how they do things. And I don't know why it's not playing, y'all. All right, well, let's see if we can make... Nope. All right, well, that's enough of that. So Melody Hobson went on to talk about how thorough, how awesome Howard Schultz is. And she said something that I thought was interesting. She said that Kevin Johnson had signaled that he wanted to leave about a year ago. He wanted to transition out. But ironically, he's going back to the board, so he's still involved. So I'm beginning to think there's more to this than just him wanting to leave or him signaling to leave, right? But again, as I fanboy out on Melody is also the co-CEO of Starbucks, the co-CEO of Ariel Investments. She's also Starbucks chief spokesperson. So how thorough does she have to be to basically have two boss positions at two major companies at that? All right. This does not want to work. So we're going to have to call it quits on that one. So that's okay. Now, this next report I wanted to cover it's titled A Report Card on Race, How Far We've Come, How Far We Have to Go. And I find it very, very interesting because it seems like, everybody that's watching me are usually members of the Black community. We already know what time it is, but it seems like the rest of the world, people, TV, radio, whatever you want to call them, are just not getting the message. And a message I'm talking about is everything that happened after George Floyd. But when you take a look at some of these stats and some of these things, people think we made progress. I would question that. But I want to know what your thoughts are after I go through a few of these points. Just a few. All right, so like it says, a report card on race, how far we've come, how far we have to go. Measuring progress on matters big and small in nearly 2 years since the murder of George Floyd. So I highlighted the first paragraph. Now, this is written by Kelsey Butler, sister over at Bloomberg. All right, the good news, diversity in the boardroom has ticked up. Congress is more inclusive. And if you're at a newsstand, you're more likely to see a non-white cover model on an international fashion magazine. But on big issues, there hasn't improved much. On big issues, things haven't improved much. or they've gotten worse. Black and Hispanic Americans are by many measures worse off than they were at the start of the pandemic. Hate crimes have surged, and the continuing health crisis has hit minority and low-income communities hard. I think we all know that to be factual, right? We know that COVID hit Black communities and brown communities much harder than everyone else. A lot of reasons point to lifestyle and diet a lot of times, right? But as we go through this article, it touches on some things that, again, I think are interesting, right? So when you start off the next paragraph, it says, numbers can't tell the whole story. They can't. You can't fully quantify backlash against social justice movements. Still, some of the researchers who began tracking these numbers felt called to mark a moment. For example, Todd Lawrence, an associate professor at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minneapolis, helped start a database of street art protesting racism and police brutality. It's a way to remember the protest and get at the feelings people are having, the emotions, the demands that people were making, and let them not disappear, he says. I get that to a certain degree, right? If you go back and you go back to the works of Gordon Parks, one of the great photographers of the civil rights era, he was able to capture the moments, the feelings, and a lot of the situations in there. Again, going back and look at John Johnson, right? Another Black businessman who started Ebony and Jet was able to capture the movements, the feelings, the emotions of civil rights. But I don't know if the pictures in these murals are a great way to mark change or not. I don't know if that's a great way to do that. But y'all tell me again, you tell me what you think. Now here, let me show this. Let me show this again. Give me 1 second. Oh, that's not big enough. So perceptions of race. U.S. adults satisfied with how society treats people of the following races. The green line are Asians, Native, Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. The purple line are Hispanics. The red line are Blacks. I want y'all to look at a trend throughout all some of these studies, right? Really quickly. I want you to look at a trend when I'm going through these charts. I want y'all to look at a trend through this, and I want you to tell me if you see the trend here. But I'm wondering if it's just me. All right, so here, again, green are Asian, Native, Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. Purple are Hispanics, and and red is Black. And so right now in 2021, these are the perceptions of race, right? The U.S. adults satisfied with how society treats people of the following race. 46% feel that they're satisfied with how society treats Asians, Native Americans, Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. 38% are satisfied with how Blacks are treated. 46% are satisfied with how Hispanics are treated. Now, anytime we're talking about data, we have to know who gathered the data. We have to know who's at the source, right? Who's at the root. Now, Gallup pulled the data. They did these questionnaires. They did these surveys. Still wonder, though, always wonder about these surveys, who's actually taking these surveys. Because I know I've never been called for any of these surveys. All right. So here's another one. American adults mentioning race-related issues as most important problem facing the U.S. So here in June 1st of 2020, 19% of American adults mentioning race-related issues as most important problem. We come to current day, it's 5%. Now, before this started, it was 3%. So it's still higher than what it was. But again, I think Black folks in the Black community would probably always say that race relations are the highest important problem that's facing the United States. I know I do. It impacts so many things, from health to money to justice to law. Like, it impacts everything. And when you don't have real representation, it's really a drag on society. We have seen, there are plenty of reports out there that have shown that when you don't have diversity, when companies don't have diversity, they tend to not make a good amount of money, or they don't make as much money, right? So that's that chart there. Poverty and unemployment. Childhood poverty and unemployment. Green is the Asian bar. I guess that's red is the black bar. Purple is the Latino bar. Blue is the white bar. And again, I wonder if y'all seeing this trend, right? The red is 25.4% for childhood poverty rates and unemployment. Purple is Hispanic, Latino, 23.9% for poverty unemployment. Let me back up just a little bit so I can see it. Green is Asian. Their unemployment and poverty rate is 15.1%. And white, which is the blue bar, is 11.4%. Now, this source is from Columbia University Center of Poverty and Social Policy. So these things, have been studied at a high level. Unemployment, one of the things I love to talk about. To me, this stat is so telling. It's so telling. All right, so we got the bars right. Asians are green, red is black, purple is Hispanic, white is the blue bar, right? Right now, as it stands, 3.3% for whites, 4.4% for Hispanics, 6.6% for blacks, 2.9% for Asians. Wonder why that is. Now, that's the unemployment rate, y'all. That's the unemployment rate. Now, I wonder why that is. Now, business, this one is very interesting. Business, finance, and politics. Number of non-white members of Congress. 57. There were 57 black members or African-American members in Congress pre-George Floyd. Now there are 62. So that's a plus gain of 5 black folks in Congress. Hispanic or Latino, it was 51, now it's 53. Asian American or Pacific Islander American was 20, now 21. Native American was 4, now it's 5. I would say that's good. Now this right here, this stat right here, 805, well, it actually says 805 plus, but 805 plus companies that are pledged to observe Juneteenth. Now I'm reserving my true feelings for a lot of this because I don't want to spoil it. But again, I find this all interesting. So Juneteenth has always been Black Americans' 4th of July. By the way, did you know Black Americans or people of African descent started July 4th too? Just a history fact for everybody. Jack Dorsey came out and said his businesses were doing it. And there's a bit of FOMO, right? Fear of missing out, FOMO, FOMO, or fear of missing out, with companies jumping to acknowledge this after coming to the realization they should. Miles Dodson, co-founder of Hella Creative, a collective of art and tech professionals in the Bay Area. All right, now this one. Black directors of companies in the Russell 3000. So when they say black directors, they're talking about black members of the boards of directors of publicly traded companies. All right, so in 2021, we had 5.35%. 5.35%. Now, in 2022, it's 7.32%. That's good, but it's still a modicum of what's possible. You can't tell me that there's not enough black folks. And I've talked about this before on the show, right? We looked at Apple's board, and Apple's doing some things, even Netflix board. They've invested some money in HBCUs. Netflix has deposited some money in black banks, but we still aren't seeing black folks in C-suites and on the board. So to me, that's one of the greatest metrics of change is how well blacks are able to penetrate corporate America. And I know some of y'all who are so pro business, so pro entrepreneurship will think I'm crazy. But what I'm going to say is that when black folks get into the room, they unlock the doors for money and opportunities for other black folks. And where better to unlock the doors of opportunity than major corporations? So again, it doesn't have to be for everybody. Doesn't have to be for everybody. But again, you have to recognize the power of having Black folks on the board and the executive suites in many of these companies. Okay. Home ownership. Home ownership rates as of fourth quarter. Asians, right? Blacks, we got Hispanics, non-Hispanic whites. So home ownership for Asians and Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders have gone up this year, or excuse me, in 2021 at 61.2%. For Blacks, home ownership is down to 43.1%. Non-Hispanic whites, 7.4%, 74.4%. And for Hispanics, it is at 48.4%. This American dream is something else. Something else. Now, this one is interesting because everybody's talking about defund the police is so bad and defund the police is this and that and yada, yada, yada. Police spending and hate crimes. 2018, 178 million, almost 179 million. 2021, 182 million. So police funding has gone up since George Floyd. But everybody's saying defund the police doesn't work. We have to learn to discern from sound bites and data. Again, we have to be able to discern from sound bites and data. They are not the same. Sometimes we'll call it signal and noise, but that's an investment term. I won't belabor that on y'all tonight. But again, we have to be able to discern between the two. They're not always the same. They're not always the same. They're never the same, matter of fact. Now, this one I didn't really get. It says 1 million number of retweets of stop Asian hate posts from pop groups BTS got in 2021, making it the most shared tweet of the platform last year. And then they go to show some charts. So I'm really not sure. I might have to spend some more time looking at this, trying to decipher it. If you all get a chance to look at it, maybe you'll get it before I will. And that would be cool. Maybe you can enlighten me. Now, this stat I thought was cool. Entertainment and media, children's books containing a Black main character. And we are seeing this throughout all of media, in my opinion. We're seeing more Black characters. But in 2020, 28%. In 2021, 21.6%. I think part of that was because of COVID pandemic. Things got slowed down. Some projects got stopped and halted. But I'm seeing that on the rise. Black is definitely in vogue. We are definitely in a what some of my friends would call a feel-good Negro moment right now. So we're seeing covers. I call it pandering, but it is what it is. Now they go into this. Let me go back and show this, y'all. People of color in The Bachelor and The Bachelorette cast by season start date. I really could care less about what's going on in Bachelor. I know people want to see themselves represented in media and air. I do think there's certain areas we don't need to be represented in. I do think there's certain areas we need to steer clear of. But that's just my feelings. So there were some other things, but I would encourage y'all to give this a look. Give this a look. Read it. It's in Bloomberg. I will put all the articles and in the comment section or in the description once I get finished uploading everything. But I find all this interesting. At the end of the day, if you didn't see what I saw in terms of that trend, in terms of Black, for the most part, Blacks were always at the bottom or eating in the highest leaders of poverty or the lowest leaders of home ownership or the lowest leaders of equity or equity inclusion in boards of directors. Right. So it just seems like, again, we always talk about this American dream and how great America is. And listen, America's got a lot of great perks, but it's also got a lot of shady-ish going on. A lot of stuff is sus. And if you're not able to really ferret out between the two, sometimes you get lost in the sauce. And so I would say stay attention. I don't want to say stay woke, but stay woke, because I do think it matters. And just pay attention, y'all. Notice that these 805 companies that are now pledging to celebrate Juneteenth, what's that really going to do? Now, if it's going to give folks a day off of work so they can take care of their mental health for at least a day, great. But if we don't have anything really substantial, it's just platitudes. It's just pandering. And I don't really think we need any more pandering. We got plenty of that, but I know folks fall for it. They go after it all the time and they can't help themselves, right? But anyway, that's my daily number for today, y'all. We covered a couple of things. We covered the market rundown, Russia, Ukraine, pulling Howard Shultz off the bench, right? That 805 number in terms of how many companies are now going to celebrate Juneteenth. I still wonder how many of them even really understand what Juneteenth is and how it's still a major mark against the United States. By the way, if you don't know what Juneteenth is the commemoration of when Black folks were actually relieved from slavery, because it was not 1865 when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. Matter of fact, the Emancipation Proclamation only released Black folks, slave folks in the Confederate States. They did not release all Black folks. And that's why Juneteenth kind of came about when they came, I want to say either 2 years, I always get it mixed up. I want to say 67 when they got to Texas and they released them. But it's also been documented that Black folks were still enslaved up until the 1960s. And if you don't want to call it slavery, you can call it held against their own, in bondage, hostage, whatever you want to call it, held against their will. Not good to the 60s. So it's not that far off, y'all. It's not that far off. So again, I appreciate you all. I'm always humble about all of your presences, right? Continue to be great, be love, always seek the light, right? Always seek the light. And I'll be back tomorrow with our daily number. Thank you all again, and I will see you tomorrow. Later, y'all.